Nobody wants to be in a situation heading into the summer break or ahead of term one next year where we're still unsure around how children and young people can return to school, kura, and early learning safely. Today I'm outlining a plan to return to face-to-face learning this year. That will look slightly different to what we're used to. We'll all need to become comfortable with the idea, and we'll all need to get used to public health measures that will now be in place. For years 9 and 10, they'll return to school, joining those students where there are already year 11 and to 13 students back, preparing for their exams. That can happen from the 17th of November. For children and young people in years 1 to 8, students will also be able to return from that date part-time. That can include alternating days or half days through year levels or through whānau groupings. Full-time learning will continue on site for the students whose parents have needed it. For example, when they're going to work, those students are already back full-time now. Each school or kura will get a bit of flexibility to decide what works best for their learners and for their community, and they'll have full support from the Ministry of Education's regional directors. Schools will be in touch with their communities directly about how they are going to be structuring the return to school and what that means for their communities. Public health advice supports a return to on-site learning. Some further measures do need to be put in place, and they will be. That includes mask wearing for year 4 and up, ventilating classrooms, which will become a lot easier over the summer break, limiting the number of students on site, and making sure that groups of children distance from each other. The health advice also tells us that in other countries, out-of-school activities actually create a greater risk of transmission than what happens in a place of learning. So what's clear is that the risks of reopening schools are outweighed by the benefits of kids re-engaging in their learning in a face-to-face context. The balance of risk is shifting as we continue to see vaccination rates throughout the community increasing. Auckland is already at more than 90% first doses, and that does provide a good layer of protection. When schools go back next week, all teachers on site will have had to have at least 1 dose of the vaccine, and that further helps to reduce the risk of transmission. The ongoing restrictions have been incredibly hard on children and young people, and of course their families as well. And returning to school, interacting with their friends and their teachers, and getting back to face-to-face learning will have a positive impact on their well-being as well as their learning as they head towards the Christmas break. We also know that COVID-19 has been pretty tough on the staff working in our schools, our kura and our early learning services. And we know that they'll need a bit of time to build back from that disruption and have a bit of time to focus on their own professional development as they and their students to make sure that they've got the best chance of success. So the government's decided to ease the requirements on schools for the National Curriculum and Assessment Program changes that we are making to ensure that they've got time and space to manage the return to school following the disruptions caused by COVID-19. So that means resetting the timelines for the refresh of the curriculum, the introduction of New Zealand history, and the NCEA change program. For early learning services, it means delaying the consultation on gazetting of the early childhood curriculum Te Whariki. These programs are still critical, and they're still very important parts of the government's work in the education space. But they do require considerable effort, and we acknowledge that between now and the end of the year, we need our schools and our teachers and our early learning services focused on supporting a return to learning. So I believe that time spent reconnecting with communities, focusing on well-being, and of course teaching and learning, will serve our communities best over the next few months, and that's what they should be focused on.